Welcome to The Driven Entrepreneur, where we sit down with visionaries, trailblazers, and entrepreneurs and discover why and how they do what they do. We'll get the backstory, plus plenty of life and business lessons along the way. Here's your host, Matt Brauning.
Hey, this episode is brought to you by my very own NLP practitioner course. I've been teaching neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, for nearly 15 years. It is the most powerful tool for communication on the planet, and it can be yours today. For a very limited time, I'm giving away my entire NLP course workbook for free. Go to nlpwithmatt.com. All the patterns, all the tools, and the techniques of NLP in the complete course workbook, the same one that we use to teach our live certification classes, yours free. nlpwithmatt.com. Get it today. Let's get back to the show. Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to The Driven Entrepreneur. It's Matt Brauning. We are back another week, another day. Are you kidding me right now? Like, this is the time in the world where entrepreneurs are needed the most. The government's jumping in and helping entrepreneurs, small businesses, minority owners. Like, there is so much opportunity right now to get out and really create and grow something. And that's why the caliber of guests that I've been bringing each and every week, especially in the last few months, have been top notch, just like today. Today, I have with us David S. Kidder. Now, he's not only an experienced entrepreneur, he's also an angel investor in over 40 companies, including early angel investments in, little brands like SpaceX, AirBnb. You may have heard of some of these. He's also the co-founder and CEO of a company called Bionic. They install proprietary solutions designed to unlock new growth and competitiveness for the world's largest enterprises, all based on models, methods, talent, tools, venture capital, entrepreneurship. This is, we were talking just offline, and I'm excited to get David's take on this, but really building the entrepreneur phase of a business from that 0 to 100 million. David believes there's a specific, correct way. There's a tool set, there's a talent side, there's a skill set to doing this. So without any further ado, David, are you with us, my friend?
Yeah, very happy to be here.
Hey, you're welcome for having, and I'm happy that you're happy about that. It's going to be great. Man, I don't often meet someone in the angel investing space. I don't go into the venture capital world very often. Is this something that you have always been like really interested in, like going back into your early years, or is this something you kind of fell into? I know there's a lot of fall into it, quote unquote, stories. How did you get into your very first angel investment?
It's a kind of a jet stream. There's an absolute network effect of like both volume and deal access you can get as you build your relationships in the world. And so as you move through and up, so to speak, in the world, you get to see things. And so if you can, in the early days now, I guess 15 years ago, when I didn't have a lot of liquidity and little kids, I was able to kind of scrap together what I could and start investing. And I've done about now over 45 angel investments over the last 15 years in 2 personal funds with my co-founder of this company and a co-founder of my last one. And LP in a couple venture funds like Founders Fund and Torch Capital and Kitty Hawk and others. So it's just about staying active and curious and showing up the best you can, whether it be a network or a small check. And if you get to 30 or 40 of these, typically 7% of all the capital deployed leads to unbounded returns, and the rest go to zero. So if you get to the volume, usually returns can be really extraordinary.
You mentioned too just now that there's different, of course, angel investor funds and groups and everything. Is a lot of the early investing stages, like I'm imagining when you're talking SpaceX, it's like, did you say, hey, Elon has this idea to go to space, maybe I'll put money towards that? Or is this the kind of deal where you're putting some excess funds of yours into a group account and they're saying, hey, as a group, we vetted this company, we vetted that company. Can you speak a little bit just kind of to the ins and outs of how that works?
Yeah, I mean, that is through, typically your access to those type of deals are, second order effects. Like that would be either through a LP relationship in a fund, or as is the case with SpaceX, or you would have it with, an individual who knows the founder and they're early raising capital. So Also just through VCs. If you have friends who are venture capitalists and they know your value and you think you can contribute something to the company, the specific, asking asking the universe in your network saying, hey, listen, I'm really good at, for me at least, enterprise commercialization. I'm happy to help, but if I can be helpful to a portfolio company where I can create unfair advantage, and I can invest, then I'd love to be helpful. You can't sort of do it too many times, but when you can, and you can back it up a little capital, even if it's tiny, you'd be surprised what you can get yourself into. And I've been very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. Before we get kind of too deep into into this rabbit hole, I wanted to just backtrack into some of your early days. One of the questions I ask most entrepreneurs, I'm fascinated by it, is how did you grow up? Were you that kind of, selling, buying the Costco candy and selling bars at school? Were you that little kid entrepreneur at lemonade stand? Or is this something that kind of, again, you fell into, maybe you were going down a certain career path? What was it like growing up, and what was your mindset like towards that entrepreneurial mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a family with lots of love, not a lot of means, but definitely encouragement, and wonderful parents. One of four kids. Went to college, but it studied at industrial design at RIT. But when I was 11, 12, it started with a tennis racket that I couldn't afford on layaway at Montgomery Ward, and that led to my first paper route. And it was it lake effect snow in the winter. You drop 26 papers off and collect money once a month, and you save. And so that was just part of the journey. Was you're only going to get you're only going to receive if you put the work in. And so that just sort of laddered up to.
Sorry to interrupt. You said lake effect. Where'd you grow up?
Just outside of Albany, and then in Rochester. So you get all the you just get you dumped on. So you get all the sort of like catastrophic snow surges. So riding a BMX bike in the winter, dropping papers off is always a fascinating experience. But I just
I love it.
In college, I was very fortunate to meet an entrepreneur named Bill Gillette, and it was the beginning of the internet, 95, 96. And so I helped, join and build this, contribute to the start of a company with him, and got the bug. And then from there really was birthed my first small startup, and then just been sort of laddering up ever since.
That's incredible. So you really went, what were your parents like? You said a lot of love, not a lot of means. Were your mom and dad kind of the mindset of, go to college, get a job, get a good career? Or were they, hey, Dave, you can do whatever you want, buddy? What was that aspect like?
My dad was like an apostle, like monk. He's very, psychologist, educated psychologist, very kind, very open to whatever journey I was on. Not a lot of pressure. They cared a lot more about character than they did grades. And then, classic birth orders. Like my three sons, I have a classic firstborn type A. It was my sister. That's my oldest son. The middle was the comedian, my sister to my middle son, and then there's always the entrepreneur, the third one, which I was biologically speaking, which is very true of my three sons. And, so I was classic birth order, and my mom was a writer. My dad was a nurturer, and they just sort of helped find that way, and was very enthusiastic to the things I was enthusiastic with. And just worked on, growing who I was becoming as opposed to who I was to the world, so to speak.
Are you glad that happened? It sounds like something that it's not as prevalent as we wish it was. Maybe today, right? A lot of us parents, we look at our young kids and think, hey, what do you love? What are you interested in? How are you built? Right. And I love that you said, focus on building your kids' character, right? Not necessarily the skill sets, although that's important. Do you are you really glad and fortunate that happened? Do you think you would have and here's the real question. Do you think you would have turned out differently? Say, had you had an engineer for a dad who said, you should be an engineer, son, do you think you would still find yourself in that entrepreneurial journey? Or do you think you might have, I don't know, ended up, working in a cubicle?
Yeah, it's funny because I was actually quite nervous about like my economic future. And so I was probably more conservative in my mindset growing up about like what I wanted to do to secure that. But in reality, I was just genetically predisposed to taking risk. And so I think my parents really taught me a lot about being both my person in the world, but also a spiritual being. And so I, despite, everyone has life experiences that shape them for better or for worse, you learn to sort of like cover yourself. And so you become a performance junkie. I think that growing up back then, those are really things that happened to you, and then how you adapted to them, how you sort of like solved yourself as a result of those experiences. The difference today is that we are that event, so to speak, in our kids' life. Like, we create the pressure for performance, out of fear very often, but also because you want the most for your kids, and too much has been given, much has been deserved. I think my philosophy, and that sort of comes from my parents, but also comes from my own, pretty radical deep work over the years, has really been around asking, like, why are you making this decision, and being in the conversation of where underneath, your decision making is this coming from, and predominantly around the idea of love versus fear. Are you making decisions through a lens of fear or one of abundance and love? And if you can think of yourself as sort of our I talk about my sons with this, there's them in their consciousness, in their meat suits, walking through the world today, getting their butts kicked, right? We all do that. And so, if you're trying to feel better when you have those experiences, you perform, right? You're trying to, it's kind of like money, sex, power, it kind of treats the harm. But if you could think of yourself as sort of like a spiritual being in the dimension of, you have your sort of soul with you that's over you, and that you're this spiritual person with this physical conscious person, what your soul is saying to you is, I love you. I love you, Matt. And I only want the things that are for you in the world that are through the lens of love. And it's kind of like, if you have kids, it's not the question of like, how much do you love, your child, Matt? Like, it's like the power of the sun. But you can go through an experience where you can experience that same love from your soul to yourself. It takes the power of the things in the world that are covering you to feel better from those old wounds. It allows you to really get in touch with the why I'm making this decision. So I think, to come full circle, the way I'm raising my sons in their life, both personally and what I hope they do professionally, is to ask, like, the origin of their decision making. And if they love themselves and they love the need in the world they want to solve, and they love the work, that alignment, I think, will lead them into the right purpose, the right meaning, the right impact, the right people in their life. But if they're coming from fear, whether it be something that they are trying to fix themselves, or I am projecting on them, I think their life will be, candidly, probably mortally wounded.
Dude, I couldn't agree more. And that key distinction you're making, man, is decision making. I think when it comes to our kids, there's probably arguably no greater skill to teach them than decision making. And unfortunately, so many parents are busy focused on outcomes, right? How do I make sure my kid has an A? How do I make sure the trash is taken out? How do I make sure their room's clean? Versus, how do I help them to decide that cleaning their room is one of the best things to do? Or can they still get outcomes they want with a dirty room, even though that's not how I would do it? But teaching the kids decision making, and to your point, decisions out of love, not fear, decisions out of purpose, right? Not procedure. Really, really good stuff. Hey, this is random, but I was just scrolling on your Instagram as we were going, and I saw you got one of Elon's flamethrowers. Dude, how good is that? You guys got to check this out. It's at David S. Kidder. It's Kidder. If you're listening to this just live, pull over in your car when you get a sec. Go on Instagram to David S. Kidder. Scroll down and you'll see one of the Boring Company. Because I remember Elon talking about putting those flamethrowers out. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't call them a flamethrower, but we call them flamethrowers. How do you like that, and how sweet is that thing?
I have two of them, one in my office and one at home. They're great.
Why they're hilarious.
I think it's my youngest son, Lucas, who's holding it and probably catching the house on fire. It's funny because one of my kind of guys in the team, it's been with us since the beginning, Hanny Hindi, used one last year in the office to souffle a bunch of like a holiday dessert. So they're hilarious. They're dangerous, of course, but they're not quite what a real flamethrower. It's still butane. It's not like, a super high heat gas, but it's they're really fun, and they're fun to use and light fires with it at the very least.
Yeah, I just love, this is the kind of idea, talking to an Elon about the idea for that. I just love that mindset, that entrepreneur of taking the invisible, making it visible, and answering the question, what if? And I know that's a lot of how on Bionic came out. What was your what if moment when you were first looking at planting or starting this as a startup? And I know you bootstrapped the company up to the 25 million mark plus, which is pretty darn remarkable. What was that? Did you have a what if moment, like before you had started on Bionic, of, hey, what if we could solve this problem, help these people? And then all of a sudden it turned in from a cocktail napkin where you wrote down some ideas to a full-fledged company. Talk to us about kind of the very genesis of the idea.
Yeah, it actually came through a single question. I was at speaking at a conference after my first business book came out called The Startup Playbook with the chairman of GE at the time. And I was on stage and Beth Comstock asked me, she said, what do you think of, the company as an outsider? And I remember telling the CEO at the time, Jeff Immelt, I asked him, how many $50 million companies did you launch last year? And I said, I bet the answer is zero. And it was kind of a shocking question to ask him. But it was very provocative in the sense that, like, what I realized in that moment is that large companies don't regularly and repeatedly create growth. And to his credit, Jeff is a wonderful guy, despite some of the challenges that really profound challenges GE's had. That he came backstage and he said, you're going to come fix this. And then he went back on stage and he said, that's the most important question in 37 years to all 800 of their top executives. And what he did is he hired Eric Ries of Lean Startup fame, which Eric had been working there for about 6 months prior to that, and then me to focus on growth mindset. And we traveled the world, and what we realized is that they kept thinking it was an employee problem. And when you go talk to the employees are like, "We don't have an employee problem. It's the mindset of the leaders." And reality is that Beth's work was really to bring the future to the doorstep of the company. In this case, it was, disruptive technologies like, renewables and data and other things. But the reality is the question is, does it get to the inside of the company? Does it transfer in? And so the model that we created it has existed. So in the same way, for good reason, an MBA administrates the big to bigger, that kind of incrementalism in existing marketplaces, the total addressable marketplace view of the world. Growth lives in a mindset around total addressable needs or problems. It's a portfolio from the outside in, from the inside out to the outside in. And there's actually forms of management. It's called venture capital and entrepreneurship, but they're the opposite of planning. They're about discovery. And when you go back and you look at, why it works, is about 70% of all the money you make in growth comes from about 7% of capital deployed. So if I, make 100 bets or $100 million investment, 7% of that total capital or volume will lead to all of the economic growth. And so when I go back to the beginning and I say, well, why did I make those investments? They have two signals. One is high conviction, asking the question, why us and why now? What is our proprietary gift with outside force? And the second one is non-consensus, meaning we make all of our money from the ideas with the highest disagreement rate. And the reason why is because it's new to you. It's new to the world. It's uncomfortable. And so we're really in learning mode as opposed to planning mode. And once you get this right in our model at Bionic, you can transform a whole organization. And we've done that now with the CEOs of P&G, General Mills, Citigroup, and others to great effect.
Yeah, and I saw you were just, again, back on your Instagram, you were keynoting in Istanbul, speaking to the Microsoft teams. And so you've done this and implemented these strategies or this mindset, whatever you would call that, across the board with what I love is different industries, different size companies, some of the largest businesses out there, Fortune 500 companies. Could you unpack the non-consensus a little bit more? That was a really fascinating concept. You said something about going with the decisions that have the most disagreement. Could you unpack that and clarify a little bit?
Yeah, the large organization is highly incentivized and paid to know. It's supposed to be predictable, right? It's like it's really incentive to make sure you beat the quarter. Of course, it's sort of like the whole shareholder capitalism challenges that we have today. Is that we don't have the accountability for winning the future on the table always. It's while growth is important, it's coming from where the business is winning today, not where it's going to be going from. And so the challenge with that is, if you think about disruption, it's I actually spent years evangelizing that disruption was real until the pandemic. And so I never have to sell that dream again. It's real. Disruption really is about when the needs change. When a customer need change, their behavior change, the model changes, very often they can't even tell you where they're going. They can't tell you what they need because they don't know. It's happening to them. They discover it in the need. I need something delivered or droned or digital versus analog. It happens because it's available, and that's where the behavior goes. So in a way, the only way to get to that future is to do it through experimentation and testing, which is why lean matters. It's why framing from making 5 big bets a year that are known because past precedents is the greatest predictor of future outcome, to discovery, where the portfolio of teaches you where the growth is coming. It very often, it really often comes from what doesn't work, the failure. And so you need tests to show you where the behavior is going, because behaviors don't lie. And we call that the do versus say. It's what customers do, not what they say, because they don't know. And secondly is because your setup portfolios around the permission to solve the total problem or the total need. Whether you have it or not, your product, your technology has it. Your job is to solve that customer need as it's changed the world. And there's a whole set of lenses that even help you think about what to invest in non-consensus we can get into as you get into the deeper issues of investing in this way. And so you need teams that can do it. You need model and leaders who can invest in it. People can hold high friction learning moments together without having to be right. So you can actually discover that future that's happening to you from the outside in.
Very, very cool. One of the things we talked about just before we went to tape or went live, hit the button with the red circle thing, was the fundamental difference with different size enterprises. And the one and you mentioned kind of quickly off the cuff, it's a different strategy for 0 to 100 million. I think a lot of us listening are not at over the 100 million mark. Can we talk about the 7-figure mark? What are some of the fundamental, whether it's mindsets or decision processes or anything that comes to your mind, strategy wise, that are unique to the kind of 0 to 100,000 or 0 to the first million in revenue that will definitely have some changes once you get beyond that space? What's some advice you have for those early onset startups?
So I wrote this book about 9 years ago called The Startup Playbook to answer this exact question. I had raised like $35 million for my software company, and we had a little under 200 people. And we realized in that journey, we had built not one company, but 2 companies at once, which is a super bad thing, by the way. You could be successful, but if you actually built a beautiful Siamese twin kid, like you could be a parent who loves that kid. The rest of the world does not like that kid. It's a weird kid, not a wonderful kid. And so, in this case, we had to this sounds like totally sick, but we had to kind of tear it in half, so to speak.
You had to surgically separate. Can we say that?
Exactly. It was a much more eloquent way to say that.
You had to rip it in 2 pieces.
Thank you. I'm going to borrow that. I'm going to cite you, Matt, for that one. But
surgically separate with love.
Lovingly separate. My board did not feel that way. But anyways, we had raised a lot. But in any case, the point was, I kind of had this question, which was like, how did I screw this up? Right? How did I miss this? And so I hit the road. And so I'd already been traveling a lot. And so every time I was in a different city, I had friends or friends of friends. And I just started interviewing some of the best entrepreneurs in the world. And I asked them really 2 questions. One was, how do you bet your life? Like, how do you know it's true that you're building a huge company? Number 2 is, what do you do in the first 5 years not to die? And that became this playbook, this startup playbook. And it had the foreword was written by Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn fame, is a friend, Elon Musk, Sarah Blakely, Robin Chase, some just amazing entrepreneurs. And they all effectively said the same thing, which is when you're betting your life in the beginning, something typically has the same 5 signals in the same order in the first 3 years. And I'll give you the executive summary. The first one is lens, and this is what you're looking for. So to your 7-figure question, how do you know that's going to work? So you want to first look through a lens of proprietary gift. Why you? What is your unfair advantage? Like, what's the thing you've discovered in the world, this secret that, given enough time, the Gladwellian 10 years and 10,000 hours, you'll be the one of one in the world to solve it. That's proprietary gift. Something that no one else knows about a need that you can uniquely solve. So that's proprietary gift. The thing is, you can't cross your fingers. Pathological optimism, wishful thinking is the enemy, that Elon said, is super dangerous in that moment, because someone will come along who's truly gifted and will win the whole space. So finding your proprietary gift in the need in the world is the number one thing. And it largely re-indexes around that one idea. 2 is you have to have extreme focus. The more things you do, the weaker your company is, the more mediocre you are, just in general. So finding the place where you have focus on that problem and your solution, and having, gotten out of the dark alleys and found the light is very critical. That takes time, but you can't do too many things. Optionality is the enemy. The third lens is you got to know painkillers and not vitamins. Where's the chronic, lifelong, malignant need or problem that you're solving that's not going away? And the last 2 lenses are really about execution. So most companies kind of fall to the sky and die because The entrepreneur is super optimistic and to the point where they're bending reality. It's mostly theirs and not customers around proprietary gift with focus that are painkillers. And the last two, once you find the true answers, and these aren't 1 or 0, they're just good enough signals, and they're true, by the way. They can't be, faked. The last two are execution. So you want to asymmetrically invest in the factor of 10x. So the 10x is the fourth lens. If I asymmetrically invest in the one thing that becomes impossible to replicate, then I can sustain the growth of the company. Because the fifth lens, which often doesn't happen, but when it does with intention, becomes the miracle, which is how do I create permanence in the life of the customer? I get so good with hooks and barbs, they can never go anywhere else. Those 5 lenses really changed my life and was the entire mindset and the learning that created Bionic, which is a product-enabled service company today that's scaling.
I just want to point out that if you're listening to this live, make sure you go find the Driven Entrepreneur, our show on demand. I put it on all on-demand platforms, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, and all that. Go back and listen to this episode, rewind that part a couple of times. It was very, very good. Unbelievably succinct, David. In just 2 minutes, you explained probably the 5 most important, as you said, lenses to look at any startup. Last couple questions as we wind down. I can't believe our time's going and we got to respect that. If you look through your startup with these lenses, and let's say I'm a year or 2 in and I'm excited and I'm growing and I'm, as you said, pathologically optimistic, which can be an issue. If I see through this lens after picking up the startup playbook, which you can get, you can find out more at onbionic.com, by the way, go check out everything David's doing. And then follow David at Instagram and LinkedIn and all those places at David S. Kidder. That's 2 Ds, Kidder. He's not a kidder, but he's David S. Kidder. If I find that through those 5 lenses, one of those is foggy, it's like, you know what? I don't really know that I have a unique take or perspective on this, and anyone else could come in and do what I'm doing. Or maybe any of the lenses are foggy, they're not right. What do I do? Do I crumple it up and go home? What suggestions do you have as far as pivoting, adjusting, kind of fixing those lenses if you're missing something?
I think the first one's really hard to fix, the proprietary gift question.
I'd agree.
Because
I was like, how do you become unique if you're not unique, right?
Well, everybody's unique. I don't say that like, to make, cheery talk. I think what matters is what you most deeply care about. And when you find what you most deeply care about, you could ask like what your superpower is, what really is, where every 10 hours feels like 1 hour. And in that, you can really understand your giftedness, how to solve that need. And so while that sounds like cartoonishly simple, it is stupidly hard, but that's really at the core of this, which is my work hanging off a proprietary gift because I care very deeply about the need in the world, and I'm learning how to solve it in my giftedness. I'm not trying to compete with everybody. I'm trying to build a one-of-one company that has no competitors, right? If it's just features of the world, and you're an arms race for, that has 100 competitors, it's not worth chasing. It's very unlikely you're going to win. So when you find that, that's really an interior question in your life. And I would start there. That's the most important one. The rest, I think, are largely fixable. Like what you do need around you are truth tellers. People, as Adam Grant, who's on our board, often says, is you need disagreeable givers, right? People who aren't just like, rooting you on and useless, but they're actually, or biased, but they tell the truth. They're very valuable and they're going to roll up their sleeves and help. And that'll help you see around the need, around the focus that allows them to, allows you, quite frankly, to decide where to put your energies and money, so to speak, to actually, produce something that passes through those lenses.
And so it sounds like almost, and correct me, I might be thinking of it wrong, but it sounds almost like out of the 5 lenses, you could look at the first lens as almost a macro lens of like the first lens. And then if you can make it through that one, then you need to look at the next 4 and make sure it cuts mustard there too. Would that be fair to say?
It would. It just, the first one is such a bias. There's so much cognitive bias around like, about what you're good at and, confirmation bias and loss aversion and sunk costs. So, you really have to, once someone's fully invested in making something true, that wishful thinking is the enemy part that Elon said.
I'd agree.
It's really hard to undo that. So you really have to be mentally strong to be able to go and do this well, so that you can, get to the truth. And I think at the end of the day, this is about truth. And if you are not in it, if you aren't speaking it, if you don't want it, you're really perpetuating a disservice to yourself, but also your investors and your customers and everyone around you, because you should be focused on what's true about you, about the work, about the need in the world, and you'll find so much more success there when you're not trying to use your company to fix yourself. The company is always a direct reflection of the founder. If it's not growing, it's because of you.
100%.
And so like these are really critical things. It's just a mirror. The job of a founder is three things: vision and roadmap is number one. Being right and on time for 3 years. Two is putting the talent in the seats in the right order. And you can't make a mistake through your first 20 employees, not one. By the time you get them fixed in the wrong seat, you're out of money, you're dead. And the third is you never run out of money. Either you raise it or you earn it. And that's all it is, just those three things. And if you build a company to do that, to solve that need, and it's true, you'll be hugely successful. If you don't, that's on you. And that's your personal growth that's stopping the company from becoming successful.
Well, that was one last huge value bomb I just want to point out again. Can you say real quick those three again?
The three jobs of a founder are simple but profoundly hard to do well. The first is setting a vision that's true for 3 years, of which you're largely driving into market timing. Outside forces really drive almost all startup success. But in the year you're in, you have to be pretty much right in the quarters for 12 months out. You can fix what's beyond that. Two is talent. So talent is you got to put the right people in the right seats with no mistakes, 0 through 20 employees. It takes 6 months to hire someone, 6 months to get the job, 90 days to fire them, and 90 days to find someone new. You're out of money if you make a mistake. You get 2 or 3 mistakes, 20 through 50, and 5 to 10 and to 100. That's all the churn you can afford on talent.
0 mistakes for the first 20 hires. I wanted that to sink in. That is incredible. So the scouting, the hiring, the bringing on team members one by one is so incredibly important. And to your point, having the right people, but also the right people on the right seats on the bus. And the third one?
Yep. Never run out of money. And there's only 2 ways to do that. One is earn it or raise it. And that's a real question for employees or founders, because they think, well, I'll raise the company to validate my idea. I would highly re-index around looking for validation in customer revenue, always. Because I think that people are looking for someone smart to say they're smart. It's a waste of time if you can actually be in the bottom of a problem with a customer who will pay you, even if it's modest, because there's an exchange of value and there's no pressure in discovering it. It's just the truth. And so the faster you can get into revenue or exchange of value, contractually or not, the better the company will be earlier, so you can discover that. Very few companies actually raise venture capital, having raised tons myself. There's 2.6 million companies launched every year. There's only single-digit thousands that raise venture. So don't think that that's your path forward. The path forward.
Would you say also it might also not be the right strategy? Like even if you had access and you had someone, a VC, say yes, would it be fair to say that in a lot of situations, it's not really the best strategy too?
If it's masking things that are not commercially true, yeah, it's a super bad idea. And more importantly is that there's not that many great VCs out there. So you're just getting money. So
plan A isn't Shark Tank. Plan A is not Shark Tank.
No. Yeah, that's all like startup vanity. It's almost a disservice, honestly.
I love it. David, man, thanks so much for, just everything you poured into us today. And I say us, me and every listener here, I appreciate you guys and I appreciate you. Again, we can find your book, The Startup Playbook, at onbionic.com, and you can find out more about David. What's the best way to follow you, connect with you, plug your stuff, man? You've been giving so much value this whole time. We want to jump in and add value to your life.
Yeah. So very kind of you, Matt, very kind. I'll just say quick 30 seconds. So if you're in a startup, Startup Playbook is gold. Not because it's my stuff, it's because it's their stories and their mindsets and how they bet their life. So the best entrepreneurs in the world. If you're sitting in a big company, the focus of my work today of the last 8 years with my co-founder, Ann, and the whole team has been on how to refound large organizations. And that you can find more about at onbionic.com or the book New to Big. We just wrote this, which is really about the story of our growth operating system and how venture capital and entrepreneurship are forms of management. So in the same way we have an MBA that manages the incremental big to bigger, and we use Six Sigma and lean manufacturing and TQM, sure. You got to have a system to create and manage growth. And that's what we do. And you'll find more about that in the Growth OS in New to Big.
Dude, that's amazing. So check that out. So you got 2 great books. The Startup Playbook is for your startup, your entrepreneur, your solopreneur side. And new to big is for the larger established companies wanting to really reinvent and create the culture, the systems, the ecosystem that Bionic can help you with. Amazing. And then, of course, follow David at David S. Kidder on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. David, you rock, my friend. I love your flamethrower from Elon. I love the work you're doing with big companies, and I love your mindset. You are appreciated. Thank you so much for coming on.
Very kind. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, that's the show for this week, man. Thank you so much again, my guest, David S. Kidder of On Bionic. Wow, what a great interview. I want you to go back again. Check this out on demand. You can search Driven Entrepreneur. If you don't already have it, you should be getting it. Subscribe. You'll get it to your phone, your tablet, whatever. Every Friday, 1 a.m. or midnight, it's going to get a new episode every single time. You won't miss anything if you subscribe, and you can go back and listen again. I would put it on half speed even, because there was so much good lessons and learning along the way with David. So thanks again for listening. Get out there this weekend and crush it. And I'll be back with you next week with another Driven Entrepreneur. Bye-bye.